Hey everyone, this is Andrew from Private Investigator Advice, and this is the Private Investigator Advice podcast. I feel like every time I say that, it's just such a mouthful. But anyways, I'm glad you guys are joining me today. And I hope you guys are having a very successful week, month, year, all of the above. I'm excited to talk about this podcast today. This is, again, from an article I wrote a while back. The topic of this is going to be, phone pretexting or physical pretexting, which is better. And this actually came, kind of spun off a question someone had a while back. And that's what prompted me to write an article about it. It's been a while, so you guys probably forgot about it. That's why I'm here to refresh your memory. But before we even get into any of that stuff, just so you know, this episode is brought to you by Private Investigator Advice. Private Investigator Advice offers several templates. Just a couple of ones that I wanted to draw your attention to is this surveillance template. If you guys are looking for a surveillance template, it's already figured out for you. And it's got all the areas that you need to fill in and even an example report to show you what a surveillance report should look like. This is going to be the template for you. So whether you are new to the industry or you want to add surveillance to your business, or maybe you're trying to get into the industry and you have no idea what a surveillance report should look like, this is the one you want to pick up. So definitely check that out. All the links to these things that I'm mentioning here are down below in the video. It would be in the details in the podcast itself. It'll be in the podcast details. The other one I want to draw your attention to is the retainer agreement. You know, retainer agreements aren't suited for every case that you do, but you're going to be happy that you have one on hand that you can adjust and fit to your needs when you need one. And basically, a retainer agreement kind of sets out the expectations of your assignment with your client and the expectations for you from them. So everybody knows what's going to be happening and how they're going to be charged and what's going to be charged for. And usually I incorporate the retainer agreement with a retainer. And so nothing gets started unless I got money in my hand to start working off of. So definitely check that out. Again, it's in the podcast notes and the video notes below. Okay. So like I had said, this is going to be podcast 98, getting very closer to 100. I should be more excited about it, but I feel like I've just been doing these podcasts for so long. I'm thinking 200 now. It's not even 100 anymore. But so the question that I originally got back in the day was, do you think it's okay to pretext face-to-face or strictly over the phone? And honestly, I didn't really like, I understood what the person wanted to ask, but I didn't like the way it was asked because I don't think that's kind of how you should look at pretexting. So what I did was I changed it to, as long as you're not doing anything, it shouldn't be like, should I do physical or, phone, as long as I'm not doing anything illegal, is everything okay? And that's not really how I would look at it. I would look at it like, should you pretext face-to-face or by phone from the perspective as what's needed at the time? Like, what's the context of the situation that's happening? For me, in my 15 years or so, for me and what I do, usually it surrounds around, locating people, identifying who they are. Do I have the right person, that I'm talking to or that I want to, conduct surveillance on? Sometimes it's, even just confirming whether they're home. And through those pretexts, sometimes information that's beneficial to me and what I'm trying to do is, can come out of a pretext. Sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's not. Pretext, doing a pretext can come in handy. And I think it's a lost art these days in the PI community. And sometimes kind of for a good reason. I just don't think it's taught like it used to be. So anyways, let's discuss phone pretexting. Then back when I, maybe when I first started and now. And so you probably heard me talk about this in one form or another. pretexting in the early days as it relates to phones, everybody kind of had a home phone still. And I think my first cell phone that I got when I was in the Army, and I want to say it was around, it might have been 1999 or 2000. And so they were still relatively new, right? And by the time I came to provide Investigator, it was 2003 or something like that, 2003, 2004. Anyways, and so, but back then, home phones were still like everybody had a home phone, right? It was still something that everybody had, and it was kind of like it was still a necessity then. Not everybody could afford cell phones, so it just wasn't necessarily the norm. And anyways, so we used that to our advantage. And so what I would do is if I knew I had a good residence, and I knew that they lived there and their car was there, really I would just place a phone call into the house to get them to answer. So I'd be like, yeah, I mean, I know that this phone number goes to that house. They answered the phone, and I got, is this, Susie? Yeah, this is Susie. Boom. I got them. We're good. And I'd be happy about it. And the reason I was a big fan of those, is because of the phone pretext to their home was because it was less intrusive. I wasn't in the bubble of a neighborhood, and I wasn't inserting myself into a case. And I'm truly a firm believer that, the less you can insert yourself, into a neighborhood, where they're not aware of your presence, the better, right? For a surveillance investigator. So anyways, that was kind of phone pretexting, for me early on. And it was successful. I mean, when we had to justify this to our client, they, hey, we have a good phone number for the house, and they answered, so we're all good. So, phone pretexting for me now, things have changed a little bit. A lot of people don't have home phones. So it's increasingly different and difficult to leverage a phone pretext like we used to. So we always are. I mean, even in my preliminary investigation, I'm always trying to find a home phone because that's an asset to me. I want to leverage that if I need to. I don't want to pretext at all necessarily if I don't have to, right? I like the person just to come outside if I'm doing a surveillance and I don't have to, make a phone call in there. But, it's just, I mean, you guys know people these days now are, their cell phone is their home phone. That's just how people are rocking it. And, they don't need to have a home phone. It's not for instance, I still remember when there was a switch when long distance United States, wasn't a thing. Like if you lived in the United States and, you had a home phone, then there was no long distance. And I think a lot of that had to do with cell phones not being long distance, right? At some point, I can't remember when there was a switch, but I do remember that. So, anyways, I don't know why I went off on that rant there, but anyways, okay. So let's fast forward a little bit and let's talk about phone pretexting in 2018. So things have changed. And the reason they've changed in regards to phone pretexting is because people don't have their home phones like they used to. I mean, this. You probably don't have a home phone yourself if you're listening to this. A lot of people do, though. I mean, excuse me. Some people do, but not a lot of people do. And because of that type of phone pretext that I just mentioned isn't a kind of given for anybody you're calling, right? Or you want to call. Most people just have cell phones. And so it's not that easy. Get the person on the phone, they're home, to confirm them home. And most people just have cell phones. It's cheaper. And it's just one less, expense that a family has to have. And some people have them. Usually it's the older generation that still has their home phone. But yeah, anyways. So that's just not an asset as much as it used to be anymore. Because, frankly, you call a cell phone, you don't know where they are. And then if you dig deeper into a pretext to find out if they are home, then it can get kind of weird and, it just doesn't work as well. I mean, it can happen. It works. I mean, you can do certain pretexts, but they become more intrusive. And I'm all about not being intrusive, being forgettable and things like that. So, anyways, because of this whole, we're not using home phones anymore, it's it's forced people to do physical pretexting instead to confirm people home sometimes. And so why are we, why do I put a focus on, confirming people home and things like that? And every situation is different. I'm just kind of using it in the context of surveillance, but somewhere along the line of history, well before I got into this industry, there became some kind of precedent, especially in the insurance investigation industry, where if you were going to conduct surveillance, for an 8-hour day at a minimum, assuming you didn't lose them, you had to know that they were home. And so that required us to either see them or conduct a pretext to confirm one way or the other. And that kind of goes back to the home phone thing we were just talking about, or it was a pretext to the house. And sometimes we just do it through the neighbors. If you got a really good pretext to them, or maybe just got really lucky and the neighbor's like, yeah, they're home, they just never answer the door, something like that. But anyways, so there was some precedent set way back when where we had to do this. And honestly, it's probably, if you want to know a little bit more about that, the clients want the most bang for their buck, and they obviously don't want you sitting on a home during a surveillance if nobody's home, right? So anyways, that's kind of, I think, where the whole precedent probably got started, even though I don't agree with it because it doesn't fit all situations. But I think it's there to kind of like, I don't know, like a default thing for all the people who don't really try to be good investigators. So if you're not a good investigator, you might work a lot of 4-hour days if you can't confirm them home or don't make attempts to. So anyways, yeah. So because of the physical pretexting, then I guess we're going to kind of talk about that. I mean, physical pretexting kind of comes into play when we don't have a good landline for somebody, or we can't get them on the phone and we need to confirm who they are or where they are or where they live and things like that. So let's talk about physical pretexting now and then. So physical pretexting, back when I started, the time frame that I told you about, 2003, 2004, I think it was. Anyways, so in those times, the internet was still young, and you're like, no, internet's been around forever. Yeah, it's been around for a long time, but the information in the internet wasn't as much. I mean, I'm sure there's some statistic of how much extra information's added daily or minute or by minute, in the internet. But so for instance, if we would search the internet for somebody, there's a 99% chance that we just weren't going to find anything related to that person, unless it was like a news article that had been uploaded, or they were a writer for something, or some kind of incident happened that made, that some newspaper was indexed or something like that. Like, it just wasn't there. So basically our thing was, we'd start our prelim off. We'd run LexisNexis information. We'd run IRB. These are databases for investigators and anybody else who has permission to access them. But that's how we would find out, recently reported addresses and things like that. But we wouldn't get photos, right? We didn't know. So anyways, we'd get to a house. Excuse me, let me back up. If we found a picture, we were like, yeah, all right, we got a picture, and it usually be crappy. Or sometimes the client, if we're lucky, would have a picture. Maybe it was an employee picture or something like that. And then again, we'd get it. It'd be crappy. But anyways, it just wasn't like it is now. So we relied heavily, again, on physical pretexting. And one way or another, early on in my career, I found myself knocking on someone's door to either confirm them home, or even if I knew they were home, just to confirm who they were. And so that would require a handshake or something to that effect, and the pretexts were slick and they were good. But even no matter how good I was, or how solid the pretext was, and I'd confirm who they were, or I'd confirm them home or something like that. It would be me inserting myself into the surveillance, and maybe some red flags would either pop up with the person I was talking to, or even a neighbor, and inevitably, it would make it difficult to do the surveillance, and maybe that's why I got burned a lot early on in my career, because it was this going back to, hey, we have to confirm them home by the 4-hour mark, and extra pressure to make that happen, instead of just focusing on like let somebody come out and kind of letting it develop. Again, more bang for the buck. So these things are pushed and pressured, and we have to do these physical pretexts. So again, I kind of came numb to the whole process. All my anxieties early on in the career, you do them so much because they have to be done because you want to get your 8 hours, and things have to happen that way so you can bill things out. Yeah, it did affect things negatively, right? Because you just inevitably, you just put yourself out there too much to where people are going to remember you. So, so how is this, relate to now, right? What is physical pretexting like for me now? So unlike early on in my career in 2003, 2004, there's way more information in the internet now than there used to be. And private investigators, and, I'm sure everybody else too in life, we leverage, a lot of the internet and a lot of social media. And so unlike then, 15 years ago, it is much easier to kind of identify people and even just like through court records, vehicle information, business licensing, online maps, all these different things make it easier for me as a private investigator to not have to insert myself into the file, into the surveillance or into the situation and stay out of it and just kind of let things evolve. And so if I can find a picture of somebody on Facebook, maybe there's some important information on there. That's in addition, but being able to say, oh, that's my person. Great. Now I know who to look for to come out. It makes things so much easier. I really don't know, I don't physical pretext as much. I mean, seriously, like there's not even close to as much as I used to do. And when people or companies, insist on that stuff, if I know a better way, then I'm going to be pushing for that better way, because I know as soon as I insert myself, then the whole situation could change. It kind of, and gosh, man, you've heard stories, you've heard bad stories about me pretexting and a result coming out of that that's not great. So, but anyways, even a lot of people that I work with, they've all kind of come to the same conclusion. I thought I was like the only one because I'd come up with a certain group of investigators over the past, 15 years, but no, it's kind of like become the new norm. Now you can't just kind of automatically go, well, I'm not going to pretext because I'm going to screw things up or something like that. No, there are going to be situations where it's very, necessary to do that. And you really have no other choice but to go up there and talk to neighbors or, try to confirm someone home like that. But, more times than not, if you've done your homework on the back end, and figured out enough stuff with some research, there's more times than not, you're not going to have to go to the door. You just got to be patient. And then the second thing that comes in is, trying to articulate that to a client, like, hey, let's just see what happens, and I've talked to you guys about this before. Like sometimes I'll even gamble, in the sense of, after the 4-hour mark, because of these rules that people have in place, I'll sit on it anyways and see what happens. I might add an extra 2 hours. And if they come out, boy, I saved myself some trouble having to pretext, right? So anyways, another reason to, again, if you do a lot of good research, you get a lot of information on the front end, to not pretext like we used to back in the day, is because it opens up better opportunities for later. Like when you want to go do spy cam footage and they're not going to be aware of you and you're not going to be as nervous because you were just at their door. And so, it's better for us. It's better for the case. It's better for our anxiety, in regards to, working in the field. So that's what I would say, take from that, in this day and age, there's just too much information available in the context of surveillance, to have to do that. But pretexting in general, like sometimes you got to do it. And sometimes it has nothing to do with surveillance. Sometimes it has to be done. And the only way you're going to get the information is by, going and talking to people, and you'd be surprised, what information you get during a pretext. Sometimes it's stuff that you would have never thought you were gotten. You kind of look brilliant when you come out of, when you're all said and done. But, Yeah. Anyways, I don't know. I would say this. So, there's going to be a variety of reasons to pretext, right? And you guys might be doing something in your industry, or you might specialize in something that doesn't require any of this. And that's great. I mean, more power to you. Some of you might be in an industry where I don't even know how it would apply, or maybe it applies and you're like, no, Andrew, this is pretexting this way as a necessity and the norm for this type of investigation. Or, and so, I mean, I don't know everything. I don't know everything that's out there. And there's a lot of brilliant investigators out there specializing in the stuff I don't even have a clue of. So, yeah, if I was to choose a way to pretext, so if I had a choice, if I'm just, if I'm pretexting to gain information or find someone home or whatever the context is of your pretext, right? It doesn't have to be surveillance. I personally would much rather do it over the phone. If it's going to work, right? If it's going to have the same effect, I would much rather do it over the phone. Generally speaking, and as it relates to surveillance, because I'm not inserting myself into the picture. And it's much easier to just, hang up the phone than to be in a situation that's confrontational face to face or something like that. So you don't want to go that. If something goes south, you can just always hang up the phone, if you're on the phone. So, let's get into my conclusion here on this topic. So my conclusion to this topic, kind of like I mentioned, like every situation is different. There's always going to be a different context, to a situation, to what you're doing in the field. Now, listen, do things legally. And if you're not sure about a pretext, get into a room or talk to some other investigators, get into, some private investigator groups. So you can kind of lean on different private investigators and ask, like, what do you think? What would you do in the situation, or how would you approach this? Because there's a lot of people from a lot of, diverse areas and diverse disciplines, I guess, in the investigation world that might have some thoughts on it. You're like, oh yeah, I never thought about that. Yeah, maybe I'll consider that. Or, oh yeah, let me try that. Or maybe they tell you a pretext. You're like, well, how does that go? Like, how does that work for you? Find out, learn from other people, be a student. I just talked about that, I think, on the last podcast. So let me ask you this. And I'm interested in hearing your thoughts, and you can, if you're watching the video, definitely reply below. If you're listening to the podcast, definitely email me and let me know your thoughts on this. So what do you prefer? And if you have a preference, why do you prefer it? And if you could explain the context of, is it surveillance? Is it some else related? Is it just for background checks, or I don't know. What does it relate to that you have a certain preference? Is there any specific scenario you find yourself pretexting more than others? Anyways, let me know. I'm interested to learn these things too. And I have a different, perspective on things. So anyways, always use pretexting responsibly rather. And if you're not sure if it's okay to do, definitely touch bases with another investigator. One that's, I would always touch base with somebody who's more cautious on things than somebody who's like, yeah, just do it. And then, say sorry later. Don't be that investigator. Be the cautious investigator. So with that being said, guys, thank you for tuning in to this topic here. Pretexting is a wonderful tool, and what I will do, since you guys are on this, make sure you, I'm going to put a link to an article I wrote about pretexting laws and different contexts of these pretexts and some of the stories surrounding pretexting. Definitely worth reading. One of my favorite ones to put together. It took me a while to put together. So maybe I'll do a podcast on it eventually. It'll be a long one. I might have to split it up again, but definitely check out that article. And I'll put it in the notes here in regards to pretexting. So with that being said, guys, have a wonderful day. You guys only had to go through one ad today, and definitely check out those templates if you're interested. Otherwise, I will see you next week. Have a great day.